Welcome to Selling in the Motor Trade, in association with Automotive Management and Simco Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips, and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bokert, or some of you might already know me as Skippy. And firstly, I want to say thank you for taking the time to tune in. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. First, it's another huge thank you. Thank you to everyone that's taken the time to send a comment through or a message and share this with everyone in the dealership. We really do appreciate it. This podcast is all about sharing best practice tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, sell more parts and service, improve the profitability in your dealership. And getting this out to as many people, we really do appreciate it. So thank you very much. If anyone sends through a comment, please send me a message of it in LinkedIn. I just want to send you out a personal thank you on it because we really do appreciate it. Now, today, it's my privilege and honor to say hi to Steve Faulkner. Now, Steve is the founder and the CEO of Automotive Solutions Group. And we're going to get into a little bit who Automotive Solutions Group is and what they do. So without further ado, hi, Steve, how are you?
Hi, Simon. I'm really good, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks very much for the invite.
It's my pleasure, actually. There's going to be this interview. I know we're going to go into lots of different areas, and I want to pick on your expertise in the industry and what's happening now. But for people who listen to this podcast, we like to start with a quick fire round sometime to get to know our guests. So, Steve, can I ask you, are you more of a cold beer or a glass of wine, or neither?
I'm certainly more of a cold beer man.
Fair enough. Are you a beach holiday or city break person?
I'm more of a theme park holiday.
Wow, you're the first person I think have said that. You're a Orlando.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Which are your best rides out there?
Oh, well, I tell you, we've just done. We just did Orlando. We did the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's a new ride called Cosmic Rewind.
Okay.
And it was fantastic. Everybody was complaining about getting motion sickness. I went on it 3 times. Thought it was great.
Brilliant. My boys love the Hulk out there at Universal. I think one of those there. That's their favorite one there, but brilliant. So we got that one. Now, are you more of an Italian meal, a Chinese, or maybe a curry?
No, an Italian, definitely. More refined.
Well refined. Okay. It's you went for the beer, not for the. I thought you might go for a Amarone or a Barolo, something like that, but no, beer.
Well, it would be a Barolo with the Italian. That's for certain. But I like to obviously vary the taste.
Fair enough. Then. Are you a good book or a movie?
Oh, movie all day. I haven't got the patience to sit there, and I probably haven't got the attention span for a book.
Fair enough then. This is for the younger generation, okay? Not even the millennials now. What is it? Y, Z? I can't keep up with it all, okay? Are you more of an iPhone user or maybe Android?
Oh, definitely iPhone. It's kind of what you get used to, yeah?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. But I have 2 sons that's Android and Samsung are better, but leave me alone. I know how it works. Just give me something that can work, but that might be my age. And Steve, are you a morning person? Or the early bird or the night owl?
No, I'm an early bird. The markets we serve with Automotive Solutions start 4 hours ahead of us. So we need to get up early to catch them.
So this is a late one for you. We're actually doing this coming up to 6 o'clock on the hottest day in Cheshire. We're both in Cheshire, and I don't know about you, but I'm sweating away here. It's so hot. Okay. But listen, tell us, how did you get started in the motor trade, Steve?
Well, you may be able to tell from my dulcet tones that I'm a Stokey. Okay. So obviously, being a Stokey, you tend to work in the pottery industry, and I did. So I was working for Waterford Wedgwood. And a job came up in the paper. My wife said, "How do you fancy that? It's a business manager." I said, "I don't know what a business manager does." "Oh, it's for Standard Chartered." I said, "Okay, so Chartered Trust."
Yeah.
It's okay, let's apply. Let's see what happens. So I applied, and of course, then I ended up working at Holcroft Motor Group in Staffordshire.
Terry Holcroft.
Yes. Terry, Calvin, Darren, yeah, all of the family.
Great. Okay, so you started as a business manager. So I'm not sure if this question's relevant. So do you remember the first car you sold? Did you get involved in that side at all, or just the BM?
No, it was all hands to the pump, and it was nothing special. It was probably a red Micra.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I like the idea in the Holcroft organization, you wouldn't allowed to be just the business manager sitting in the back waiting until the deal's done. You would have been involved all the time, wouldn't you?
No, absolutely. You're forever changing the pitch round, making sure obviously that the look and feel was inviting to the customer, and really just supporting the sales team and hoping that sales support comes back the other way as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Putting the rose tinted glasses on, what was one of the greatest days when you were back there selling as the BM? Any days really stand out for you?
Yeah, I think there's a number of days that stand out, but I think one day in particular, we had a local newspaper editor that came in. And so this guy turned up, and he was a bit scruffy, and he had an old t-shirt on and a pair of ragged jeans. And we had a Sunny GTR in the showroom.
I know what that
and he was wandering around this car, and everybody was kind of dismissing him. There's no way he can afford that. Anyway, he purchased it. And the fact that he purchased it for me was just a great moment, because it just proved to everybody you just shouldn't take the first impression as being the impression.
It's that whole prejudged story, isn't it? I love stories like that, especially as a BM where the salespeople don't really get involved at all. Yeah, great. Okay, now this is a shameless plug for our first 90-day sales training program. Okay, and it's very, very shameless. And the people listening to this podcast, they'll be used to this. But we often say in the first 90 days, okay, people learn in the industry good and bad things that last with them for the rest of their life. Okay. Can I ask you, is there anything in your first 3 months that's as relevant today for someone starting a business as it was when you started back at Holcroft's?
Yeah, I think there's two things that stand out. I think the first thing is you've really got to make sure that you don't prejudge the situation. You know, we've got so much expertise in the motor industry. When a poor old customer walks through the door, sometimes we probably think we know more than the customer.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't make that assumption, and we should really get into the depths and build the value with the customer. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is somebody gave me a book, and this book was called Who Moved My Shoes?
Wow, great book.
And it was all about change. It was all about adapting to change and accepting change, and not being frightened of change, you know, endorsing it and supporting it, and really grasping hold of the opportunity. And it stayed with me.
Brilliant.
Certainly with my days after Holcroft's, it certainly stayed with me.
I tell you what, isn't that a book that I've got to go back and revisit again? Because it was in the early 80s that book was out, and it's as relevant now as it was back then.
Yeah, there was a few books, wasn't there? There were quick reads.
Yeah.
1 minute manager.
Yep.
You know,
Kenneth Blanchard. Great.
Swimming with sharks.
Yes. Yeah, great. So, okay, so you go from the business manager at Holcroft to the CEO and founder of Automotive Solutions. There must be some steps in there. What happened from Holcroft?
I think the first thing that happened, young family. So I took on a role with Holcroft's for leasing and looking after the contract hire side of the business. And then we were working with a company called Woodchester Finance.
Yeah.
And the rep came in to speak to me and said, I'm leaving. And I went, oh, that's terrible. We've got a really great relationship. I don't understand why you're leaving. What on earth? Why are you leaving? And he says, well, I'm taking on this new role. I said, well, who's going to do your job? And he said, well, we're looking for somebody. And I said, well, if you gave me this amount of money in a company car, I'm your man.
Yeah.
I think 2 days later, I was interviewed and I got the job on the 19th of December.
Okay. Nice time. Probably a good time for you to get your head around it before the new year starts, though, I imagine, right?
Yeah, well, I think my first action was they had a sales conference in Marbella. So I think on the 8th of January, I was on a plane. It was fantastic. What a great way to start with the company.
I just have to explain to the younger people, if you're under 30, listen to this podcast, the motor trade used to send people all around the world on sensational trips, okay? It doesn't quite happen as much anymore, not just because of COVID-19, but its cost, but that is just pure motor trade back then, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely was, okay. So tell us about then, you go into the finance side of it. Tell us about Automotive Solutions, okay? What do you do as a company? How do you work? Tell us, people who haven't heard of Automotive Solutions, can you tell us a bit about?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I think that the first thing is the business was created to support the warranty side of automotive. Mm-hmm. So that was our first focus. And it kind of came off the back of, obviously off the back of Holcroft's, I was working with GE. I'd done quite a lot of work with GE around remarketing and retention and insurance products. So I'd looked after the UK for insurance. And then ended up with Alpha Tamer in the Middle East, working out of Dubai. Mm-hmm. And it just gave me that impression that there's such variation in the way that each market operates in the automotive industry. And in some markets, the markets are quite advanced, mm-hmm. And some of these products have kind of passed us by. Yeah. We've had them, we've used them, they've been great value to the customer, really supported the business. But whether through regulation or other purposes, we've kind of slowed down in providing these types of solutions. But certainly across the GCC, the MENA region, the industry is still kind of maturing. And because it's obviously still quite young, some of the solutions that we've seen in the UK, well, you can plagiarize. You can pick these solutions up and transport them quite quickly. Okay. So that kind of got us going with Automotive Solutions.
Okay. So the Dubai market, it always fascinates me. Some people, some good friends that I've worked with in the past, and you know, Steve Bridgman, I know you know Steve, yeah. Mike Thompson, a big shout out to Mike Thompson. It always fascinates me. And now I've not worked in the Dubai market. I stop there on the way home to Australia. Often when I go home, it's one of the stops. And what was I hear stories about where cars were left at the airport, okay, where people had to write out 48 checks if they were going to do a 4-year finance deal. People leaving cars at the airport because if they were, is it right, Steve? If you default on the loan, it's a criminal offense and they get locked up. Can you tell us a bit about that market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing I would say is the UAE, Dubai, has moved on such a lot over a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, what these countries do is they take mature regulation and they adopt it. Okay. So needless to say, the regulator for insurance and for banking over in the Middle East tends to pick up that regulation from the UK. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it can be a bit stifling because it can be over-regulation for a maturing market, never mind a young market. Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing I would say in terms of the difference, I arrived there in 2006. Mm-hmm. I only went there to do a pitch. So the idea was turn up, do a presentation to a local family, get back on a plane, fly to the US.
Right.
And I did. So I did the pitch. I turned up in the US and my boss at that time gave me a call and he said, we've had some feedback. I went, oh. Uh-oh. He said, well, the family have been on the phone and they kind of want to go ahead with what you've promised. I said, oh, great. And he said, well, maybe not. What did you promise? And I said, nothing that should worry us. He said, good, because you were going there to deliver it. So I went there for 6 months, and 6 months ultimately became, for all intents and purposes, 11 years.
What was the program you started on, Steve?
The program we started on was on automotive finance. So okay. The idea was to create an automotive solution because the reality was that banks didn't really provide auto finance. There was no such thing as PCP. To your point, there was no check clearing facility. So the banks, when you issued checks, the banks got the checks and then they met up with other banks to swap checks in this big room. So
sorry, no clearinghouse.
Yeah, there's no clearinghouse. So they open this big suitcase and they'd say, "Hey, I'm HSBC, you're Standard Chartered. I've got some checks for you, and they'd swap checks.
Wow.
So that was what we first visited, the first thing that we encountered. The second thing we encountered was, best way to put this, it was a very entrepreneurial market.
Mm-hmm.
It means the sales guys were getting paid by everybody. It was the Wild West.
Right.
Banks
Okay.
were paying the sales guys, the insurance companies were paying the sales guys. The sales guys could earn more money out of finance and insurance than he could have selling the car. And
all direct to the salesperson. Sure. So volume bonuses and stuff like that was going directly into the salespeople's hands by the sounds.
Absolutely. Yeah, and every salesperson knew a friend who was a trader.
Okay.
So our part exchange frequency was like 2%. It was a difficult market to go into to make change, but with the conviction of the owners, mm-hmm. and with some great people around me, Mike included, because Mike came over around 2010, helped us launch the PCP product first in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And the reality was, we got hold of this thing and we changed the industry.
Wow, that's great. So as you said, it's changed so much. So PCP is in that market now. So it is, finance is accepted now in that market.
Yeah, I think you don't have any lenders that are independent. You don't have any mm-hmm. motor finance companies through an OEM. Mm. But you still have banks like HSBC and everybody else who will say, we'll do an auto loan.
Okay. Well, listen, over your years working with dealers, dealer groups, manufacturers, you must have seen some really, really good operators. Can I ask you, in your opinion, your view, what makes a really good operator stand out from the rest? Anything that springs to mind?
I think a good operator is also a teacher. I think that's the first statement I'd make. I think if you can watch a really good operator and learn from them, then to transpose those skills and to even just be a fraction of what they are can really help you in your own personal career as you go forward. So you have to choose who you think is a good operator. I think that's the first challenge. Mm-hmm. And for me, a good operator is somebody that, and again, I know it might sound that I'm repeating myself, it's somebody who doesn't prejudge the situation, somebody mm-hmm. who listens and make sure that they listen as much as they talk. And that's sometimes difficult for salespeople because we all do the same thing.
Yeah.
But somebody who really represents the company and treats the customer like an individual. And I've certainly seen some people that have sprung to mind through the years. And I'll give you an example. There was a young lad that joined us at Tollcross, and I was sat right next to him, and he was really personable, really mm-hmm. lovely lad. Did a great job looking after the customers. And it was the very first time I saw somebody do this, but he was talking to a customer and he couldn't get the customer to commit.
Yeah.
And he stood up and he said, I'm so sorry. I've obviously not represented the product really well. I've not listened to you properly. Can I introduce you to my manager and just make sure that you get a full service before you leave? Because I haven't done my job. Needless to say, the customer bought a car.
Needless to say, the customer said, no, it's not you. It's not you. And then the real problem comes out, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the first time I'd ever seen that done.
But again, that salesperson, they have what's the word I'm looking for? The self-confidence to come out and say, I've done something wrong. Too often you wouldn't get salespeople doing that, would you? You just know that person's gone on to be a great success in whatever he's done.
Absolutely. And I think there was another guy who worked with us at the time. I'll keep their names out of this because it would be unfair.
Yeah.
This guy was just totally unstructured. He was a great salesman though. He'd sell the part exchange while the customer was still signing up to the new car.
Okay. Yeah. A real, hungry by the sounds.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been sat with a customer going through obviously what they purchased. And he's telling me I've got another customer buying their car, which is parked on the road.
Yes.
Can you come and talk to them? And I'm going, whoa, stop. You're just going to cause us a problem.
Incredible. So I suppose this is kind of talking about the next part of this, the yin and the yang, I suppose, the flip side of the coin. I was going to ask you, someone who really struggles, or a dealer and they've got all the attributes to be great, but they just haven't got it? Is there anything that stands out? Anything that you see the same failings again and again?
Yeah, I think that it's at the moment. Let's face it, it's not really that difficult in the trade to make a good margin.
Isn't that so true? Currently, it's starting to soften now, though, I think, Steve. But and for the people who listen to this, we're recording this in July 2022, because I know a lot of people go back and listen to these, but it's just starting to soften. Would you get the same like used car prices, for example?
Yeah, I probably don't see it the same way as you, not just yet.
Okay.
I think the pandemic has obviously created a false environment for us. So today, valuations of companies are high, margins are great. Used car values, hey, listen, you can get free motoring. If you can change your car, if you can find a car to buy, if you can change your car every 6 months, 12 months, you'll get free motoring out there, pretty much anyway. But I think that when you actually look at this generally over the last decade, I think the businesses that have kept up to date, have looked after a customer, adopted digital journeys rather than physical journeys. I think what they've done is they've tried to level up a little bit the experience the customer has, regardless of who he speaks to. So the standards and the operating procedures are all there and they work really well. I think where it fails is when you get somebody that's new into the role or new into the business, and you don't give them that skill. So you don't actually put your arm around them as the teacher. I'm not going to say the boss or the manager, but my belief is if you're a leader, you're a teacher. So I think
again that teaching. I love that approach. Now, we run a sales training company, so of course I'm going to say that. But great leaders are teachers, aren't they?
Absolutely. If you don't think you're there to develop people, then you're in the wrong job.
Yeah. Okay. Can we just explore this? We know the semiconductor crisis. We know that wiring looms. Okay. Lithium, the supply of lithium in the world, that's going to be the next shortage. I'll get to that in a second. But what's the impact in your view? Okay. We've got less new car sales. We know that. What's the impact going to be in the future going forward? Less used cars are going to be out there. Okay. The dealer park is less. So are we going to be able to service enough cars there? How does that affect it? Crystal ball time now, I suppose I'm asking, Steve, and we are July 2022. Are used car prices going to drop off a cliff? I personally don't think that's going to happen. Are they going to soften? Do you think the supply of new cars is still going to be short enough that used cars are still going to remain strong? What's your gut feel of what's going to happen between now and the end of the year?
I think we're at a point in the industry which is unprecedented. We've all had lots of experience in this industry. It's given us all a great living, and it's given many people many things to rejoice and to celebrate. But the next 10 years, and maybe 10 years is too long, maybe 8 years or 7 years, this period into 2030s is going to be the most disruptive we've ever experienced in this industry. And I think it's a culmination of many things. I think the pandemic has had a bigger impact long term than we actually anticipated. So the fact that showrooms were closed, the fact that people were displaced, that their salaries were impacted, and you look at what happened in the UK, but when you actually look at markets like the Middle East, people were transient in nature. So people were coming to a country to work. And when the showroom closed, they had to go back to their own country. So it wasn't just their job that was impacted. It was actually their lifestyle, their way of life, their families, their children. So I think the knock-on effect of what we saw, I think we'll live with for some time in terms of people, in terms of their skills, and getting that SOP working again if you've got a really well-refined operating procedure. I think the next thing is obviously the supply of new car. Now, supply of new cars impacted in two ways, primarily. I think the first thing is the semiconductors. Obviously, you've now got companies that are manufacturing semiconductors themselves, and they're building plants to do so because they realized that they were reliant on 3 supply chain providers, and all 3, for some reason, at the same time, had a problem.
I didn't realize it was as limited as that. It was only 3 main suppliers. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, there was 3 main factories. One was caught through a drought. And obviously with this, you needed to have plenty of water around. So they were trying to struggle with that problem. Another one was COVID related. And another one actually had a fire through the factory. So the disruption all kind of happened within a very short period of time.
I just thought it was the pent-up demand. I didn't realize it was that side of it as well that had the huge effect there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then you kind of look at, so obviously we know we've got a problem with semiconductors.
Yeah.
And it's not like you've got one semiconductor in a car. Obviously you buy a new Range Rover, you've got 180. Yeah. So it's not as easy as picking one out of an old car and putting it in. I think the certain markets bought up all of the existing stock, like the US.
Yeah.
So the US served its own market first. So a lot of the dealers in the Middle East who sell Ford and General Motors are selling 30% of their demand because the US are soaking up all of the stock. And the reason they did that is because the US bought up all the semiconductors. You got companies like Tesla who then fitted the older version semiconductors to keep on production. Yep. So they did things to keep going.
And did lots of software development, getting the semiconductors to do more things that where 3 of them they would have used in the past. I understand.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And then obviously we couple all of that with, what is a disaster in the Ukraine. And there's many companies that rely on Ukraine for wiring looms.
Yeah.
So a lot of the German brands, they'd moved their manufacturing for wiring over there. So they're certainly now impacted off the back of it. So this supply chain problem is not something that's like a light switch. You can't solve the problem with the flick of a switch. You've now got to catch up.
Yeah.
And the knock-on effect is if you fail to put a million new cars into the UK marketplace, then you've not served the fleet companies. The fleet companies haven't had the big discounts that they're used to having. And obviously discounts can be, as we know, 30%, 40%.
Well, Steve, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but if anyone's tried to hire a car recently, they will know exactly the impact there because daily rental, it's just stopped. So you're hiring a car, you're paying a fortune for it. But of course, the car is not a 3-month-old car that you're used to. That has to be that same impact there.
Yeah, because your daily rental companies, the model was quite good. Obviously, they bought a car that was discounted. They sold the car for pretty much what they bought it for, and the rentals were cheap with the cash flow.
Yeah.
But the problem was the daily rental companies were all under contract to release the cars. So they released the cars back into the network and then became management cars or used cars. And then they didn't have any new cars to replace them with. So we saw it when we were going into the US. A £750 2-week rental on an SUV became £3,000.
Wow. I'm going over to Oshkosh next week, and we have the similar thing. I'm thinking, what has happened here? I can't remember the exact figures there, but it's just
supply and demand.
It is
supply and demand. So I think that you kind of look at all of these things going on. You know that obviously you've taken all of these cars out of the marketplace. Well, that's actually not stopped the used cars getting older.
Yeah.
So they're still obviously going through the cycle. The car park is, for all intents and purposes, reduced. So cars have just moved down the value chain. And I think the problem is it kind of then has a knock on to used car values. So anybody who's had a car for over the last 12 months knows that the value today is pretty much what the car was valued at 12 months ago.
Can I just explore that? You may remember back in 2008, the world went to crap. And I remember being in a Land Rover business that had something like 30 Range Rover Sports in stock. that had a book drop of 5,000, I think it was 4,000, 5,000, you may remember this, a month. Now 30 cars, $5,000 a month, that hurts. So a question I have is, now, again, I don't think these prices will drop off a cliff. I might have that completely wrong, but the price of used cars got so close to the price of new cars. Price of new cars are going up anyway, so that will help that. The supply of these semiconductors and wiring looms, that's still going to slowly come through. It won't be a switch. But what about the customer with consumer confidence thinking, well, hold on, do I really want to PCP a car when I've got this guaranteed minimum future value that is going to be, I don't know, 20,000, okay? In 08, the car was not worth anything like 20 grand. Okay, is there more customers going to think, well, maybe personal contract hire, leasing might be more important. PCP, I'm worried about. You remember in that world, equity burn. There was always the issue. And I would say, equity burn is only an issue if we're saying silly things like the mileage is irrelevant, Mr. Customer. Let's just put you on a $5,000 mileage. It's only if you hand the car back and all that bollocks that business managers used to say. Okay, now, thankfully that stopped most of the time. But what about the salesperson, the customer with the confidence on PCP? That has to have an impact, hasn't it?
I think it does. And I don't think we've quite worked that out yet. So when you actually look at the market and what's happened, and if you sit down and almost plot it out on a piece of paper, you know the price of new cars is going up because of supply and demand. Yeah. And there's a real shortage. And there's a waiting list on some cars now of almost 2 years on JLR product. Yeah. So that means that if you're driving a 2-year-old Range Rover, the chances are you're going to have some pretty cheap motoring for a couple of years because those cars are not going to be available for the used car market to sell. And you're not going to want to give up your car because you're actually enjoying driving it. You just can't get a new one. But the problem with that then is a knock-on effect, because if customers are holding onto their car for longer, then the vehicle is obviously running out of warranty. Yeah. And as we know, as a car runs out of warranty, the chances are the customer will then maybe not be able to see the value of having the car serviced in an authorized workshop. Yep. So then they choose a lower cost option. So you've then got a double whammy, because obviously you can't sell a new car. The customer's keeping his old car, and he's not coming in for workshop work anymore because he's able to obviously find a cheaper solution. So I think the onus is on us to help the customer through that journey, but also to help the dealerships and the workshops through that journey. So, you've asked me about automotive solutions. Obviously, one of our big products is warranty. So we do provide a annual renewable repeating warranty that keeps the customer tied to the workshop. So we drive retention. So I think we're going to see more of that. I think the other problem I am concerned over, and I'm sure most of the finance companies are concerned over, is the equity parity situation. The reality of what we see is people are paying top dollar for a car. So they're not getting a discount. Yep. And they're certainly not getting a great deal on a used car, because again, the supply chain is impacted by supply. So you're seeing cars going up in value.
Well, I've just got a real scenario there. We've got so many customers. We picked Land Rover before, and they're probably one of the OEMs that have been hit the hardest, I think. Yeah. But you had people that were used to driving an Evoque, that you could probably get a customer into Evoque for, really, depending on mileage, obviously, deposit, so forth, but you could get them into a Evoque for, sometimes $400 a month. Yeah. That same customer now for an Evoque, we're going to be asking more like $800 a month. Okay, that's just because we just can't get it. So I think another challenge we have is customers are almost been addicted. I don't know if that's the right word, but addicted to paying $400 a month for their car. I'm driving a lovely Evoque for $400 a month. Now, when we're saying, by the way, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, you can't get that $400 a month. That's only going to get you into a RAV4. It's almost like saying the deal you got 3 years ago was too good. That's going to be a tough conversation to have, isn't it?
It really is, because again, the customer relies on us to help them and guide them. So to your point, the issue will be with less discounts, with other pressures in the pipe around affordability, cost of living, less deposit on the car, then an higher interest rate, because we're obviously starting to see the interest rates creep up. So the monthly payments are going to go up. And then I guess the other issue is, if you're paying top dollar for car today, and for any reason you can't make the payments on that car in 2 years' time, when the market corrects itself, are we going to see negative equity?
We're going to have to, aren't we? We've seen this in 08. Okay. It was 08, wasn't it? 09. Have I got my dates right there?
I think you were around that kind of time, 08, 09. I think we've seen all the little splashes of it in 15 in certain markets.
And that's the first time really, and it was equity burn. That was the thing. We're going back to that situation, do you think?
I think we are, because the equity is not there, and we're in a false economy around the vehicle price. So as the market corrects itself in terms of supply versus demand, then I think the only thing that can happen is that we see values soften. And as they do, you still have the same loan, you're still making the same monthly payment, which means obviously the only thing that can hurt you is the equity. Now, obviously, you could walk away, you could take a PCP, you could hand it back. I guess that's one way around it. A lot of people still buy cars in the UK on PCP, but other markets, PCP doesn't exist. So there's no handback. A lot of people move in the UK to leasing options, and the reason they move for leasing is because the discounts that are on the new car gets them a great deal on a lease. And frankly, I've had leases of cars and I've purchased cars, and if I could find a great lease deal today, I'd probably take it, if I'm honest. But there is no cars, so the leasing companies are now suffering. So them cars are not coming into the used car market. So you've then got a supply chain issue, because obviously leasing isn't driving stock.
That just leads me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bokert through LinkedIn. Thank you.